Hi, everyone. I invite you into your breath, into the living river of your breath. And every elder that I have ever listened to in this continent of so-called Australia has always told me that country is way vaster than what European minds think of as land, think of as rivers, think of as skies. It's every story, it's every piece of history and lore, Lawlore, that creates that and is birthed from that. It is every relational pivot and fulcrum. It is vaster and more ineffable and more mysterious than we could ever conceive, and yet we are conceived by it. So I fully acknowledge the depth and significance of country, and I am in Gadigal Wangal country in so-called Sydney in the inner west, which is a place of artists and activists and queers and Aboriginal people. And I think of First Nations leadership, which is ongoing and really vital and dynamic in the face of continued colonization. And I'm thinking of the fact that I recently came here from the place that I'm Indigenous to in Bali, which is going through a really rampant development stage right now, which is causing a lot of social tension and political tension. And I'm just really reflecting on Indigenous lifeways and cultures of innovation and regeneration and giving deep, deep acknowledgement to and respect to the elders past and present. And I offer over to you, Suzanne.
Yeah. I'm in the coastal Miwok territory of California, also a land of artists, activists, queers, creatives for a long time now. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm deeply grateful to the original stewards of this land and their descendants that are still here, that are still working for that beautiful relationship. And I'm very, very grateful to be here right now having this conversation and to be in this house of someone who is working also really strongly to to remember, to remember, to remember.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
I'm thinking how witchy it is that I met you 13 years ago, and it would have been almost to the month because it was
Right.
Skeleton Woman Camp 2012, and I think it was also at that witch camp in the Redwoods that I heard you sing live for the first time, and you sang the Freedom Song, which is my favorite song of yours, and I've been listening to it a lot recently to just like help center me and help be in the whirlwind of the chaos of things. And then, you came to Bali not long after that, and I was living there at the time, and you hadn't been there in a while. And Bali changes constantly. The thing about her is that she is, I've been saying lately that Bali doesn't heal us, she wakes us up. And
Mm,
even now, she wakes us up, and she does that for everyone who would be caught in her embrace.
mm.
But yeah, that was really fun time. It was, and then I've just, worked with you, been your friend, connected with you in several continents since then. Uh, but yeah, I'm curious, like for those of the people in my life or in my network who might not be familiar with you, can you say some things about yourself right now?
Say some things about myself.
Yeah.
I'm a postmenopausal queer witch who has been teaching in and doing ritual primarily in the reclaiming condition, but I'm also fairy trained for over 35 years, long time.
Mhm.
And so ritual is deeply embedded in my whole being. And I'm a musician, and I've spent my life traveling about teaching and performing, and mostly in sacred context. So part of my mission is to help people understand the power of collective sound, the power of collective singing, how it's a birthright for us, how it's part of our sacred ceremony, and has been, and it's been systematically taken away from us, but it's ours to reclaim. And so my great joy is bringing people into those spaces where they feel like they can express themselves. And then also, I've done a lot of activism in my life. I founded a nonprofit training folks to do a certain kind of embodied activism, and have worked all over the world with organizations doing amazing work in the world, and bringing people to see that work and to be part of that work. So I also deeply believe in that all of the work of our ritual, part of the reason to do it is to connect us with the responsibility that we have to care for the great web.
Yeah.
Just put it that way. And I'm single. I've never been married. I don't have children. I'm a free floating right now, like home free, and I have been
Mhm.
for numerous years now, which is quite a journey. And I'm actually really enjoying it. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
right now, it's tough times. It's tough
Yeah.
times for those of us who are living in the United States. It's very heartbreaking here. So
Yeah.
I want to add that layer to who I am right now as
Mm.
well. I'm also really heartbroken, and so I'm doing the work. I'm utterly grateful that I get to do magical work,
Mm.
and I'm struggling with what's happening in the world right now, even though I have an ultimate kind of, I think, yeah, no, I have an ultimate trust in the awakening that needs to happen for humans, and that the suffering
Yeah.
sometimes brings the awakening. That's what I'm aware
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have that too. I'm not sure. So some days I'm like, yeah, I have that ultimate trust
of. Yeah,
in that like curve of, I
yeah,
think, was it Martin Luther King who said something like
it
that
was.
about curving towards
It's the
justice?
arc.
Yeah,
He
the
said
art.
the arc of history bends toward justice, which I think
Yeah.
a lot of us are really questioning right like, Nick, is that true? Is that
Yeah.
really true? And maybe we're just on another part of the spiral,
Maybe.
like,
Yeah.
or maybe we're just going around in a circle and being silly humans.
Yeah, I was actually rereading in the last 2 days I've been rereading Dreaming the Dark by
Uh-huh.
Starhawk because it's
Great
probably
book.
my favorite book of hers. And
Me too.
yes, there's just pieces in it. And she first wrote it as her thesis, and then it came out in 1982 at a really, I think Reagan was potentially the president or had just become the president. But there's just a lot of like reflections and dreaming the dark that are relevant now.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm reading that book again and just capturing pieces that, a friend of mine once said, because, there's so many in the last 20, 30 years, there's been so many new occult thinkers and writers and witches who create this amazing body of work, myself included. And whereas I feel completely like in deep gratitude to Starhawk and constantly reference her, a lot of people don't. And so one of my friends says, "Oh, but Starhawk already said that," because there's all these people, often men, who are like saying these things, and
Yeah, like
maybe
I invented this new thing. It's like
yeah,
I think that not just about Starhawk, but about
yeah,
witches all the time.
yeah.
People come up and be like, "We invented this thing," or "There's this new science called forest bathing," and I'm like,
And you're like,
"Forest bathing? Are you
yeah,
insane?
yeah,
Witches have been doing this from the beginning of
yeah.
time." I definitely get upset about that sometimes, where I'm like,
Yeah.
You didn't
It's
invent that."
it's very commodifying. I think when people say forest bathing, and then they often reference, oh, in Japanese culture, so and so, and then they kind of dismiss that. And then they talk about forest bathing, yeah, as if it's new, and we're all like, oh no, many of us have been doing that. And all of these there's been a new in the last, I would say in the last 5 to 7 years, there's been, especially through COVID, there was this like upsurge of interest in tarot, astrology, witchcraft, ritual. And a lot of it makes sense, right? A lot of it makes so much sense. We all yearn to belong and connect and have like agency and have intimacy with the cosmos. This is great. But then it brought me to this awareness. My housemate would go, "Are they a witch or are they witchy?" And I
Mhm.
and I knew what she was saying. Like she was saying, yeah, are they kind of like you, Theo, and like your community where you're like in it, or are they like kind of benefiting from the periphery of it, which is still cool, but reference and refer and like acknowledge. And I think
Acknowledge.
that that is a problem also within our own communities, but it's also something I've noticed like in broader society when it comes to what people often call woo, which is not actually a term I like, but because I feel it's quite denigrative. But like I feel like that those sacred practices that you and I are steeped in, like sometimes they're just commodified or spoken of out of turn and like either like people are like, oh, I'm gonna go do yoga now, or I'm gonna go, on my meditation retreat. Again, love, love, love. But I always question, I'm like, are you drinking deep of this well, or are you sitting next to someone who has? Like I think about that a lot.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of appropriation in, again, in our culture and out of our
Hmm.
culture. I mean, our witchy culture. And I think that precisely because the witches from the beginning of time have been kind of outliers and they've kind of had to,
Yeah.
because of some persecution that's happened, a lot of
Mhm.
persecution that happened. There's been a lot of like invisibility underground. Like when I
Yeah.
was a baby witch, and many years ago, it was dangerous to
Yeah.
come out and be like, I'm a witch, and now there's people doing it all the time. But so I think that that's part of it too, is
Yeah.
just that there's been this way in which there's had to be a cloaking, which
Hmm.
is an interesting conversation to have right now too,
Hmm.
right? It's interesting. I just heard this guy who's the head of what is the organization that Peter Thiel put together? It's a software that is
Okay.
now the software company for the U.S. military and the U.S. voting systems and everything. And the CEO of that company was saying something like the biggest threat to American democracy is the leftists and their thinly veiled pagan agenda.
Oh yeah, that's
And I
right.
was like, oh, okay. So here we are again, right? Here
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
in this place where possible persecution could happen, at least in the States,
Hmm.
of anyone who is an outlier, anyone who is, iconoclast maverick in that way. And it's a question that we all kind of have to ask ourselves, right?
Hmm.
And you and I were discussing beforehand, this is a really challenging time in the world
Hmm.
because of the rise of fascism. It's a challenging time, definitely in the United States. And those of us who were aware of some of the quote unquote dangers of doing, political work or anarchist work or witchcraft work, that's coming up again in this really
Yeah.
interesting way. And I've been reading about the French Resistance, like all the people in the French Resistance who they really risked everything. And there was all these really interesting inventions, like all the James Bond 007 inventions that we know of
Yeah.
now. Those were all invented by the French Resistance, like
Yeah.
pencils with, little scrolls with instructions on the inside and lipstick
Mhm.
bombs and all that stuff. And you were saying that it was astrologically a similar time to now.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that, please? I would
Yeah,
like to.
so on the 7th or slash 8th of July, depending what hemisphere you're in, Uranus moved into Gemini after being in Taurus for 7 years. So Uranus is in each sign for 7 years. And whenever Uranus moves through a sign, that is a code for how that is telling us how disruption, transformation, and upheaval will occur, right? And so between 2018 and now, Uranus was disrupting, transforming, and creating upheaval in agriculture, in our food systems, in how we relate to the quickening kind of collapse of ecology. That's Taurus, right? And then it
Uh-huh.
moved into Gemini not that long ago, 7th, 8th of
Uh-huh.
July, and it will go back into Taurus momentarily, and then it will commit to Gemini until 2033. Um,
Uh-huh.
but basically, what astrologers are suggesting or forecasting is, and always looking back at the periods that we had this before, is that when Uranus is in Gemini, it's often a time of resistance.
Uh-huh.
Alice Sparkly-Card, who was one of my favorite astrologers, they were saying that Uranus and Gemini is not good for empire because Uranus breaks things down and Gemini breaks it down into tiny pieces, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not good for empire. It creates fracture and it creates splitting. Whereas
Mhm.
empire thrives off these kind of like monolithic kind of oppressive top-down structures. And it really needs like one truth, one God, one
Right.
Right. And we've been suffering under that since 5000 BC, probably, right?
Yes.
And, there's lots of ways of talking about that. But also in Uranus and Gemini, interesting that you mentioned inventions. Uranus and Gemini always creates the space for radical innovation and invention. So the
Mhm.
slinky was invented like
Yes.
so
That's
my
radical.
yeah, so my friend Andy, who I'm teaching
Yeah.
this astrology class with, he's an amazing.
Uh,
He's like the slinky is such a Uranian Gemini icon. And
mhm.
but also, during the last Uranus and Gemini, we broke the sound barrier, so
Well, and now
yeah.
what's happening is AI, right? So
Yes,
for
AI. Yeah.
me, the interesting thing about AI is that according to a lot of people, reality is about to get really weird. And the interesting thing about witches is that witches already know that. Like
Yes.
witches are already moving through realms
Yes.
and moving through realities. But also there's a way in which you're honing your capacity to know what's real. You're honing your
Yes.
capacity to suss out, to send your antennas out and be like, that's real, that's not real.
Yeah.
This is real, that's not real. And I think the skill set is going to become more and more important.
Yes. I think it's always fascinating. I agree with you completely when I talk to people who aren't familiar with our technologies and I say to them, "Oh, witchcraft actually is very real." Like yes, we know how to go into multiple different states of consciousness. Yes, we communicate to all kinds of different agencies and spirits and mysteries. And guess what? That's all very real. And we learn how to get really grounded, centered, aligned, lucid. Like the practice of witchcraft makes us more lucid. And
But
so,
it's also practicing like going there
yeah.
and
And
coming
coming
back.
back. Yeah.
That's really important
And
too.
I think witches emphasize the coming back because we're so naturally, witches are so natural at ecstasy.
Right.
Our traditions are ecstatic. We are so able to go out, but the wisdom of witchcraft is, and you come back, and you integrate, and you
That's
reflect,
right.
and you
Yeah,
express. Yeah.
that's right. That's right. So
Yeah.
it's actually capacity to move between the worlds
Mhm.
with flexibility,
Yeah.
and maybe that's going to be a skill set that will come in handy, you know.
I think so. I think the
Yeah.
AI thing is really fascinating. Like I sit currently, I find myself in this interesting place where I'm like, I don't know what's going on, and I'm going to admit that around AI. And I've
Yeah.
never opened Chat GPT in my life. I don't have it. I have this kind of funny, like kind of pride thing around it as a writer. I'm like, but then I see how useful it is for my friends, some of my friends. And so I kind of have friends who are really into exploring the minutiae of AI's capacities and other friends who are like, artists, writers, creatives who are like, fuck no, it's stealing from me without my permission and then making a mess of it, which is all of this is true. The whole spectrum is true. But AI, I also understand that it's not a monolith.
Well, it's what you put in is what you get out, right? So
Exactly.
there are creatives, there are like the woman who wrote Hospicing Modernity. She created an AI called Aiden Cinnamon Tea, and
Mm,
Aiden is amazing because Aiden has been programmed with a very different worldview than perhaps those who are programming ChatGPT,
yeah.
right? And so it has its own, we could say, creative bias. It
Yeah.
has its own sort of like bias of inquiry as opposed to a bias of definitive answers to things. And the little bit that I've played with it, I was fascinated because it really is about what you put in and you get back. So that, just like all things in modern culture, those who are in control of the origin
Mm,
of the thing will matter, right?
yeah.
The information matters.
Yeah.
So I don't think, I mean, it changed my mind a bit about, I
Yeah.
was also very much like AI is stealing from the people that we love the most, the
Yeah.
artists, and especially in the music realm. Oh, don't get me started on that.
Yeah.
But there may be some uses for a more creative genesis of it all,
I
right?
agree. I'm open to the potentiality of the multiplicity. And again,
Yeah.
so Uranian, so Gemini. And the other thing that's happened and the whole reason that Andy and I decided to teach this class, which is about to round up, but we wanted to, because we noticed, wow, Pluto is going into Aquarius, committing to Aquarius, Neptune is going
Wow.
into Aries, Uranus is
Wow.
going into Gemini. So this all happened in a period of like 5 months. And this is, this is rare in terms of a human lifespan. So this happens every 200 to 300 years. And so for the three outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, all to shift into new signs within, a short period of time,
But
we,
also signs of disruption, signs of
yeah,
energy, signs
yeah.
of, I don't know, like you said, innovation. That's
Innovation,
intense.
yeah. And they're also all currently trining or sextiling. So they're all holding hands and they're all basically saying, hey, this moment, because astrology, one of my astrology mentors, Kim Fairminer, she says, astrology is the study of quality of space and time. And so when I think about the quality of this space and time, I'm thinking about this Plutonian Aquarian confrontation of the systems of power and the revelation of secrets and wresting back our authority as a collective, right? And then when I think about Neptune and Aries, because Neptune is often representing what the collective is fascinated with, and also what we might be deluded by, right? So
Mm,
so in the last period, up until recently, Neptune was in Pisces, and in that time, again, we saw a collective who became very into mysticism again. We saw popular culture become saturated with high fantasy, but also astrology and tarot, like statistically
mhm, right.
wild. But now
Uh-huh.
Neptune's going into Aries. What will we become fascinated with? Kind of like hardcore individualism and
Uh-huh.
also militarism, but also on the flip side, which I can just see coming down the track, but also on the flip side, the Aries is the primordial hunter. Aries is the sign that begins the zodiac, that rises up out of the oceanic, mystery of Pisces and says, I am this. I'm going to go figure myself out. But the only way that Aries can figure themselves out is by interacting with the world. And so there's going to be so much innovation and invention, but also a lot of mistakes. But
Right.
and I just feel like Pluto and Aquarius, there's a lot of this is precarious AF. This is a precarious time. And so I think witches and spirit workers and artists and lovers and we need to, like, what my spirits are telling me is don't back off from leadership right now. Everyone who is in a role of leadership, you must be in your roles of leadership
Yeah.
and you must be fully in it.
Yeah.
And also don't forget to laugh. Like that's what they also keep telling me. Laugh, have joy,
Yeah.
take pleasure. If you have the privilege to take pleasure and have joy and laugh, please,
Yeah.
yeah.
And also find the absurdity. Like the laughter is innocent laughter, of course, of course,
Yeah.
of course. It's so good for us. But also there is a lot of absurdity in what's going on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just say, especially in America, like there's things that are
Especially in the US.
so hard to comprehend that you just have to go, oh my God, and laugh at the absurdity of it. And that's an interesting magical space, right? I'm not going to give you power over me because you're so weird,
Yeah.
so bizarre that I'm just going to laugh at you because
Yeah.
it just diffuses, the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Well, that's some age-old magic, as you know, laughing at these monsters. And
Yeah, yeah,
and
laughing.
even like weird, I don't even want to give them that appellation. Like weird to me is so sacred. So I'm
That's
wondering
true.
if we can find some other words for the bizarreness of what this is.
I mean, okay, so to me, it's like an awakening opportunity, right? It gets so difficult to comprehend, maybe,
Mhm.
and I think that's happening for a lot of people right now. We won't get into the specifics of why that's happening in the States, but I think there are some people in the States who've been in a delusion, in a particular kind of cultish behavior, and there's this one issue that's just kind of making things shift for them. And that's going to be really interesting, right? The cult people are talking about like when cults dissipate, it takes a while, but they do. Because if they lose their main mission, they start to crumble, right? And these are cult experts, and I think that that's kind of happening on a big level in the States.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who might just go, what have I been doing? What was I thinking?
Let's hope so.
I hope so too.
it takes a lot of, I've noticed it takes a lot of courage and discipline to rest yourself out of those states. And so the people who can do that, I'm like, work. If, because that means you have the courage and the discipline to like snap out of it.
Right.
Some of those people have a lot to lose
Mhm.
within the structures and systems they're playing within, you know.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been an interesting thing for me is that my guides and allies, both inner and outer, for the last couple of years, part of the reason I decided to go home free and
Mm,
be on this trust journey that I'm on is for my own edification and growth and evolution, but also, my guides and allies have been saying, get rid of your stuff, like
mm,
cut off the sandbags, get really unfettered
mm.
so that you can go where you need to go.
Yeah.
And so that if there are times and places where people will have to lose a lot, right, of the things that we know aren't necessarily even the real wealth, but they're going to lose some of that stuff, then I'm already in that position where I've given away all my things. I don't
Yeah.
own anything. I own a car, which is amazing, but I have to because I'm a chariot. I
Yeah,
have to have
that's
another
right.
car.
Yeah.
But everything else is gone. And that is an interesting meditation for me over and over again. To just be like, no, I'm going to keep it this way. I'm going to keep this sense of I don't have anything to lose in the traditional sense of the word, and therefore I can be open for what is needed and where it's needed. And it's definitely not an easy journey because there's all this parts of me that want to know. And I'm just assiduously just trying to keep these doors open and keep these doors open and be in this process of trust, which sounds really, every time I say it, I'm like, oh, process of trust, whatever. But that's actually happening.
Yeah.
And I am being surprised all the time. Like I'm still here. I'm still
Yeah.
okay, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I believe that for you. Like, it seems interesting to me because, like where I'm at right now, and we have, you and I have some parallel things we do. Like, I actually don't know what I'm being led to do in that regard. Like there are definite messages I am getting from the mysteries and the spirits, but not around like you seem to be getting this very specific one about unfetter let the sandbags go and like be flexible and move and I really feel that for you
Yeah.
I see this raven, this serpent, this fire between the worlds, and I'm like, yes, that's so good. And then I'm a bit confused about personally about where am I meant to be? But what
Right.
I have noticed is that I just surrender to where I am lately. Like I'm like, oh, I'm in Bali. Oh, now I'm back in Sydney. Oh, now I'm there. And that seems to be essential. But I have this strong feeling that, in a year or two that could all shift again. And that brings me to like want to talk about like, how like with your sense of purposefulness, like your sense of connection to purpose and vocation. Like I'm curious, what are your anchors that I don't know, keep you there or revitalize you with your work and your play?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like what are you noticing are the main anchors or talismans or portals?
The main through line for me is my daily practice. Like I have a
Mhm.
daily practice that's it's not kind of, it's absolutely unequivocal. Like,
Well, let's talk about that.
yeah, it's not even a
Yeah.
question. I have definitely had conversations with people in the past who are like, why do you do it? And why is it so important to you? And maybe you should not do it so much. But it's like, I wouldn't be able to walk. Like it's a very physical practice that I do
Yeah.
every day. If I didn't do it, I literally would not be walking very well.
Yeah.
So it's for me because of all of this, the kind of the way I'm physically made up, I have to move energy, strong energy through my body every day. That's unequivocal. It's part of who I am and what I bring. And so that's a touchstone. And being able to be a hermit is also a touchstone. So that's tricky on the road, right? If you're on the road and you're at someone's house and you're staying with them and you don't know where your next meal is going to come from and it's all new, it's very difficult to be like, I need to go be alone. But that's what I do now. I'm like, I need to go be alone for an hour or
Yeah.
two. And that's a touchstone for me too, is that understanding of what my energy field can relate to and what it can't. I think a lot of people when they're moving around don't necessarily feel that in themselves. And so they get maxed out energetically, especially if they're sensitive to other people's energy. So I have to really be careful, like check in with myself all the time. Like, am I overwhelmed right now? Am I experiencing too much stimuli? Do I have to go and be quiet?
Yeah. I really need that too. Like the last week was so social and full on work wise because I was reorienting to a different work rhythm. And
Yeah.
it came to Sunday, and my friend and housemate was like, "Oh, let's go see the whales because the whales are heading north to have their babies." And we had already done some of this because we live lovingly here. And they're like, "Oh, let's go to the national park and with our friends." And then another friend of mine said, "Oh, come, my friend Pabs, who I think you know. Yeah, you know
I do
Pabs."
know Pabs,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was like, come hang out with me and my dog at the park. And then some other friends were like, come to Sad Dyke Sundays at this bar. And all of a sudden I was like, I can't. I have to just not. Like, and you know what I did? I watched a show about Guru Jagat.
Oh, that show. Oh, I have so many things to say about
Okay.
that.
I watched that, and because I was like, oh, I love watching documentaries about cults. But also, I came out of watching those 4 episodes with a lot of reflections. Like, I thought I was just going to be entertained and slightly perturbed, but actually, I came out of it being like, okay, Yogi Bhajan is a piece of shit. Like, that was one of the things I came out with. Number two, everything I've ever thought about Kundalini yoga is confirmed. Number three, this is actually very complex. Like this is so complex. Like people yearn for this. Like this brings me to the daily practice, the discipline. I watched people in that documentary who were so committed to their spiritual practice. It touched me so deeply. And the thing that freaks me out and probably freaks out people who are more inclined to be in anarchistic traditions like reclaiming is that this one person, one guru thing, which is traditional, and traditional doesn't always mean good, but is age old,
Yeah.
can be so problematic. It doesn't always have to be. I have had singular teachers. And the thing about those singular teachers is that they are aware that I'm also learning from this and this and this, and they encourage me to do so. I feel like if you have one mentor, one guru, one teacher who is like, you can read no book, you must listen only to me, I think then that's a giant red flag and you have to really consider it. But I was
Absolutely.
what the other thing that I came out of, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts about that documentary because of your connection to the yoga universe.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not
Mhm.
so connected to that universe, but
Mhm.
but Guru Jagat's mother's grief.
Mhm.
Like I was just like, oh, like watching that her grief was actually really intense. Anyway, tell me about your reflection.
Well, the first thing I want to say is I love that you said you're like I watched things, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I always say about teachers, specifically spiritual teachers or magical teachers or people who are teaching between the realms, is that if you're doing deep, meaningful, and significant work all the time, I reserve the right for you to do something that is not deep, meaningful, and significant. In fact,
Yes.
I think it's really important because you can't keep up this relentless transformational thing for 35, 40 years all
Yeah.
the time. It's a
Yeah.
burnout path. You have to be in this dance with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just want to say, yay you for doing that thing that's going to balance out.
I do it all the time.
Yeah, great. Me too. Like I'll say, I need to go watch a TV show right now
Yeah.
because then I'm going to go do this really deep, meaningful,
Yeah.
significant ritual or performance or something that's yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing about that documentary is that, I was steeped in the yoga community for many, many, many years because I had a nonprofit there and I was teaching in the yoga communities and teacher trainings and all that. And I met a lot of those characters in that film or in that documentary, or some of them anyway. And the one thing that I learned was to follow the money.
Mm.
Right? This is before the documentary came out. I was like, why do all the music, the Kundalini musicians that I know and the Kundalini teachers I know, why are they all making so much money? And I was
Mm.
curious about this. And also, this one band kept getting the Grammy every year. And they were a
Yeah.
Kundalini yoga band, right? And then I started looking at where the money came from. And in that documentary, you see that Yogi Bhajan started Yogi Tea, which is an amazing tea company, but also Akal Securities, which is a military security company.
Yes.
So that was really interesting to me. I was like, oh, this whole thing is partially being funded by a military security operation. That's fascinating. And the things that so the discrepancy between traditional spiritual values of how much is enough or live simply, it just doesn't exist in that realm. In that
Yeah.
realm, in the Kundalini realm, it's like more is more and richer is richer and wealth is wealth.
Well, that's what they say.
That's tricky. I know to
Yeah.
me, that's like whenever big money and spirituality are combined, things
Mm.
get really tricky. Just like when big sexuality and
Yeah.
spirituality are combined, it gets tricky. And I just don't think the Americans or maybe anyone has a
Yeah.
sophisticated palate enough to really parse that stuff out.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the interesting thing was looking at what that money was doing, right?
Yeah.
It's like the first time I used to do festivals all the time. I did music festivals and yoga festivals, and then one day I realized all of this is being paid for by marijuana, right?
Yeah.
All the people that were making those things happen, and that was my living. I just didn't know it. I just didn't know where the money was coming from. It was all marijuana growers, and since marijuana has become legal, those festivals just aren't happening in the same way. It's not
Yeah.
the same money. So following the money is a really interesting kind of inquiry about those things.
Yeah.
And then just on a spiritual level, you know, I do think guiding people is great, but to your point, there has to be anytime anyone says, I'm here for you, I'm the one for you. I'll always, and I heard yoga teachers say that too. I heard not just Kundalini yoga teachers, but other yoga teachers say that too.
Sure.
Like, I am, join my cult, basically.
Yeah. I
I'll
mean, it
always
happens
be
in
there for
every
you.
tradition, in every community. I've
Yeah.
heard witches say that too.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a big red flag. To your
Yeah.
point, that's a really big red flag.
Yeah.
And yet, God, wouldn't it be great? Like, there's times in my life where I'm like, I just wish someone would tell me what to
I
do.
agree. I agree.
Would love to be told what to do
Yeah.
sometimes. Like, tell me what to do next. So I love that this self-initiating thing is like this constant having to pull oneself through in a really interesting way and really trust those inner guides and the inner teachings and the and the process and make mistakes. And
Yeah.
it ain't for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
No, it
That's
is
why I
a
love I love witches because we make so many mistakes and yet we're
yeah.
we're together and we forgive each other in many ways. I mean this huge generalization, but like you know what I mean. Like
I
many of
think we
us,
do. I think we do, yeah. I think
yeah,
the cultures of witchcraft and the deep wells and rivers of witchcraft are ultimately, recently I've been meditating on the discipline of the craft is love. The discipline of
right,
the craft is love. And
yeah,
so for me, that has been a really profound inquiry, affirmation, spell to
wow,
understand and orient to what I really mean when I do anything at all. And so
beautiful.
and so that
Mm.
has been profound for me. And I've also kind of jokingly said recently, I'm not a Buddhist and I'm not a Christian, and I was raised a Hindu, but
Oh,
but I've jokingly said recently that I check my own frames by referring to Buddhist mindfulness and Christian grace. And so what I mean by that is when I'm kind of in the specificity and locale of witchery, which I almost always am, like that's who I am, that's the body of my work, that's what I'm drinking in, that's what I'm pouring out. Every now and again, I realize I have to look outside of this to check things. And,
yes,
and and the two frames I use are Buddhist mindfulness and Christian grace. And
yes,
and and I find they're so useful to check my witchery because they're in some ways so alien from it. Because so
right,
much of witchcraft is about feeling, sensation, imminent self-possession, and fierce, almost like passionate love,
yeah.
euphoria, right? And the depths
It's
of
mystical. It's like mystical
it's
love, right?
mystical love, yeah, and it takes us to interesting places. And so I think about detachment. And I think,
Right.
and
That's a
I think
hard one to
about
reconcile.
grace. And I think lovingly witches, we're able to be, because I don't consider witchcraft. So it is, I know for many people, their religious tradition, but for me, it's just who I am. And it
Yeah,
just is what I am, you know?
me too. Me
And
too.
so for me, I refer respectfully, again, not a Buddhist, not a Christian, but I study those things as a student. And I refer to them occasionally, kind of almost internally, just to kind of check myself. And back to that kind of teacher thing, like you and I are often in positions, whether we ask for it or not, of like being seen in particular ways, right? And the overculture kind of describes and inscribes mentors and teachers like you and I who have, like spiritual experience and maybe also clout, like project,
Experience, yeah.
people come to us and ask us questions. And I think one of the best ways to answer questions is to be like, what do you think?
Yeah.
And also like, oh, yes, look, I have some ideas about that, but you could also go, do a trance with Hecate and she'll tell you.
Right.
Like that was
Right.
literally something I said a few weeks ago to someone.
Right.
Because I'm much more interested, especially with witches who are coming to me for mentorship, I'm much more interested in them having the direct experience and then coming back and telling me about it.
Yeah.
And I do think that witchcraft as a philosophical, magical technology and tradition, I think it does value that.
Specifically, yes. And I think that's one of the big differences is that if we call, let's see, if we call source grace, we'll
Hmm.
just put those two together, then the witch isn't just at the mercy of the grace,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
They might want to let the grace lead
yeah,
sometimes, but they're not at the mercy of the grace. The
yeah,
witch says, I'm in conversation with the grace,
yeah, yeah,
and I have agency within that.
yeah.
And that is a huge differentiator.
Mhm.
And then, the Buddhists are interesting because there is that detachment thing, which is really hard for me to reconcile, but it's also
Yeah,
really interesting too. But
yeah,
there's also this thing called engaged Buddhism, which was
yes,
deep, devoted toward active action
yeah,
and activism. There's, Tibetan Buddhism, which is a lot of similarities to the witch
yeah,
ethos, right?
totally, totally.
You go into this, to the life experience this is my understanding of it. I might be really off, but my understanding of it is you go toward the experience to have the transcendence, right? The
Yeah,
transcendence in the experience. It's not the detachment from the experience.
yeah,
It's going toward, right? Which is
yeah,
again what witches often do
yeah.
as well. And so I think, yeah, I think that's a beautiful frame for you to have. One of my teachers is a strong mystical Christian,
Mhm.
and I don't agree with everything
Mhm.
she teaches, but I do receive a lot from just
Yeah,
again that different perspective on it, rather than just thinking like I'm in charge of it all. And that's what my own trust journey has been about.
Mhm.
Not just only being I am a willful witch who's been on my own since I was 15, but more like how can I open to grace? What does
Mhm.
that even mean?
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's a great provocation for witches because we're so used to being ultra responsible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
precisely.
yeah,
Right. So I will not stop being responsible, but also are there, what are the things I can't see and what are the doorways that I need to just keep open? And I do think that there's a lot of space in the world right now
yeah,
for a different kind of perspective. And I think my favorite witches are the ones that are working in different specific cultural, religious, spiritual modalities, and
yeah,
kind of bringing them into this witch frame instead of like, you must do a spell about it's not really like that for me either.
yeah.
I will do spells, but that's not my only frame. It's like
Okay.
there's a much wider thing that I'm trying to hold and wrestle with and be with and dance with, maybe is a better term.
Yeah,
And I think you are too.
yeah,
And that's really important, being a multi-dimensional, theoretical kind of
yeah.
thinker about it all.
Yeah, like for me, I always meditate mystically on like the spell, right? So when I think about the witch's spell, which obviously has infinite applications, I also think about this this tension between surrender and agency. And
Yes.
I know that you know that like all witches eventually get to this point where we understand that the most fecund, potent magic is when we are able to paradoxically desire something specifically so intensely and like in that moment, connect to these allies, pull this power, focus it. Like that is such, to this day, one of the most euphoric things I can do. Fulcrum, arrow, bam,
Yes.
cauldron, do
Yes.
it. I
Yes.
am one with God herself.
Yes.
And then, but then to really, for it to work, you gotta let it go.
Yep.
And the thing that I've learned to say is this or better?
This or something better for all
Yeah.
concerned.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I'm just like, the magic that flows from that place is profound. And the spell doesn't just become this one event, it becomes this teaching cycle. Like over years, it's like, wow, that love spell I cast 5 years ago is still teaching me. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And you're like, and I know you
I
get
do.
that.
Yes.
And it opens these initiatory portals, and then you're like learning this, that, and the other, which you could never have dreamt was possible when you first enacted and catalyzed the thing. And who's to say that it wasn't, one of your great ancestors way back who's like whispering in your ear saying, you must cast this spell because because
You have to
we're,
start the process.
yeah, exactly. We can't fully know all of that.
Yeah.
That's why the gods are the gods. Like my experience of the gods is that they don't know everything, but the gods know quite a bit about their sphere of relationality, and they can
Mhm.
see and sense way farther down the lines of fate, karma, and weird than us. But
Mhm.
we are included with them. It's like I think the thing about the craft that I love is that we are family with the gods. We're not petitioners, we're not
Right.
supplicants.
Right. Right.
We are kin with
We're
them.
kin. We're
Yeah.
kin.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's a homecoming for
Yeah.
sure to do the work that we get to do every time. Every time it's a homecoming. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, here we are. We're all in this wonderful, multi-dimensional, multi-time soup together. What are we going to create, really? It's really the joy of it, right? The joy of creation.
Totally. The total
Um,
joy.
yeah, and to me, that's one of the when I had this moment recently where I was like, and it was a pretty dark moment, but I'm gonna share it vulnerably, where I was like, wow, humans, the gods, the great creation beings gave us this incredible gift, this earth, and we're fucking it up pretty
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
And it caused me to drop to my knees in a deep sorrow about that, because we are so powerful, because we are so expressive, because we are so creative, because we are so loving. And there's a lot of ways in which that love got twisted into hate, and it's gonna take a lot to unfurl all that. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I am saying, like, this is an intense time to see, like the things that I know are possible, the things that you know are possible, the ways that people can relate to each other, that deep, deep love that you're talking about, love for all beings, love for each other, love in every action, love as service. That could be every human's experience.
Yeah.
And working with people over the years, I'm sure you've seen it, when people unfold from the hate, they become that. They become that because they are that, because it's who we are at the deepest level. And so to see it twisted into something else is like, oh my God, you got it all wrong. How are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Not that I'm right or you're right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just more
Yeah.
like, I know that love is, I mean, every religion in the world, every spiritual practice in the world says love is the key.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's also that you like people like you and me, we're invested in that. And so, we're invested in this co-creative mystery because love is Genesis. Love is
Love is
catalyst.
the law.
Love is the law.
Love is the law.
I want to ask you a specific question because I feel like it might help to like kind of bring all of this home because you have been so like in different cycles and seasons involved in reclaiming as a tradition but also as like a question. Sometimes I think of reclaiming as a tradition also as a question, right?
That's definitely a question.
And that's a question we ask ourselves and the world, but you've been involved for like I don't know, 35 years and I'm so curious like
Well,
how,
wait a minute. Let's do the math. Hold on.
let's do the math.
I joined reclaiming when I was 22, and I'm now almost 60. How many
Okay.
years is that?
You're asking the wrong person.
Oh dear. Math is not my strong suit. Hold on one second. So let's go. 60 minus 22 equals 38 years.
There you go. 38
Jesus.
years.
I mean, wow.
Um, yeah, so I'm curious, like in your experience of coming into the collective and then the collective dissolving and then this tradition moving through the world through witch camps, but also other, things like and how it is now, which it's still a very like it's almost like it's a new thing. It's this
Yeah.
vital thing.
Yeah.
And it questions itself and it collapses and it revives itself, which is great. I'm curious what are some of the I don't know, what are some of your like reflections or inquiries based on that 38 years?
Um, okay. Honestly, I think the tradition has woven many, many strands together in this really beautiful way that I adore, without too much dogma, without too much intractability. Although I think some things are like, this is how we always do it. But there's also a lot of openness. There's also a lot of willingness to do things. There's even a willingness to throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is problematic sometimes.
Mhm.
But and so I have a deep love of the reclaiming tradition such as it is. It's not an organized tradition. It's disorganized. I like that actually. I think that's really interesting. And the problem with that, so I'm going to be a Virgo now for a minute. I have 5 planets in Virgo, is that when there was the dissipation of the central organizing cell, we'll just say, for the worldwide tradition, we lost a main way to communicate with each other. That, and also we had a magazine that went online, and people didn't come online with it. So there was this splitting off. Different communities were built up around it. They sometimes communicate, they sometimes don't. There's cross-referencing, there's all kinds of stuff, but there's no way for all the people in the tradition to come together and really be a collective force for change. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it would have gotten intractable. Maybe it would have gotten dogmatic. Maybe it would have gotten too dependent on one or two people or something like that. Like maybe it needed to be as disorganized as it's been. But I think that I see often a lot of times like people sort of not informing each other in ways like this is happening over here and this other thing is happening over here, and we're not communicating with each other. So
Yeah.
that's my take on it. Like I would love to see some people who've been involved for a long time come together and kind of vision how we might be a little more organized in the future. But
Mm.
again, I also recognize that since I was a part of it, since I joined, people actually have a lot less free time. That's actually true.
Mm.
So it's difficult to say, more volunteer work over here.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
do I do think that it has had an impact. Like just looking at myself, I brought, I taught, when I was teaching with my nonprofit, we taught, I don't even know, let's just say 5 intensives a year for 60 people each, right? That's at least that many people. And then a lot of festivals. So I was bringing this, specifically the work that I do with reclaiming, which is ritual and singing and activism, right? And radical analysis of power. I was bringing that to every one of those trainings. And
Mm.
I gave attribution. I did say, I didn't invent this, because people would be like, what the hell was that? And it's like, I didn't invent this. This is representative. And I would name the tradition that I came from. I would name some of my teachers because I think it's really important for people to
Yes.
know
Yes.
that it wasn't Suzanne Sterling doing that. I mean, although I'm skilled at it,
Yes.
I come from a tradition. And so just thinking about how many of those people were impacted just by me, and I'm just one of, hundreds and hundreds of people.
Mm.
And you too, right? So I feel like we don't even know. And then there's also all of the activists that have been involved in reclaiming, and how many, like I specifically know people that that were at the WTO, the first WTO protest, that with the world wouldn't have even known about those multinational corporation deals that were happening behind our back without that one protest that and there was many others too, right? So the impact that it's had is kind of because of its spidery nature, it's kind of immense. We'll never really know. No one's
Yeah.
collating. No one's being like, here's the history.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. You can't because it's impossible to do. Like those of us who want to try to record and remember and like, and some of us try,
yeah,
like,
you're doing a pretty good job, my friend. You really are.
and we go to some of these like elders and and they'll say to us, "Oh, I forget." And that can be really hard because it's like, fuck, you're only in your 60s and 70s and
Mhm.
you forget.
Yeah,
And
you do.
but then sometimes if you ask a question in the right way, it kind of jogs the emotional memory. And so sometimes it has to be through relationship. But
Yeah,
I agree with you completely. And I see the influence of reclaiming witchcraft in many places that would surprise people. And I go,
absolutely.
like, oh, like you or you must have at some point gone to a witch camp or read Starhawk's books or read this person's books or studied with Thorn or went to a class with you or because that influence obviously transforms people and it moves down these other lineages, these artistic lineages, these organizing lineages, these activist lineages, and I find myself in places where I'm like, oh, you're connected to reclaiming somehow. And I
Absolutely.
think out
Like
of
this.
all the witchcraft traditions, it's one of the biggest that has that influence on the non-pagan and the non-witch world.
Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the ally circle that I learned from Jack Davis, who brought it from the sex positive queer community in San Francisco. But I learned it and I brought it to a bunch of people. I taught it at a lot of, brought it into as a technology into a lot of places. And then people that I know that have massive programs where they're teaching hundreds of thousands of people are using the ally circle and they learned
Mm.
it from me and I learned it from Jack and I believe me I definitely said this came from blah blah
Yeah.
blah,
Yeah.
but it's like fascinating and they're like, oh yeah, I adapted it for my purposes, and I'm like, awesome. One woman had adapted it for eating people with eating disorders and another
Mm.
woman adapted it for spiritual AA meetings. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's doing like I think maybe I don't know. I've read or heard Starhawk reflect on how maybe reclaiming never became what she personally envisioned, but then but it's also not just her child, so maybe she had a
Yeah.
personal vision for it and she wanted the world to be in a different place by now. But there's just so many fucking different colliding.
Yeah, but she also wanted, like, it's a collaborative
Yeah.
tradition.
Yeah.
So one thing I know about collaboration is you don't always get what you want. In fact, most of the time you don't.
Yeah.
There's like something else that gets to happen that's not your own agenda.
Yeah.
And she was pretty clear. I mean, I was at the meeting where she was like, let's let the biodiversity of this tradition be at the forefront. And I
Yeah.
think that's a bold move. I really
Yeah.
effing do, because it could have been organized, it could have been guided, it could have been led, and it just hasn't been. And that's caused immense frustration for me as someone
Mm.
who sees the power that could happen if we actually collectively organize a little bit just to point ourselves toward movements, right? But at the same time, maybe it's best this way.
Mm.
Maybe it's best to be underground. Maybe it's best to be viral. Maybe it's best to be grassroots. Maybe it's best to be individuated or like small collectives.
Yeah. I think there is wisdom in that for sure. Because the different communities just have such like we all do still drink from this like immensely beautiful, unfolding, but also it's like rooted tradition. Like
Yeah.
this tradition drinks from older traditions. We name them. Sometimes we don't know fully, and then of course each of us, we are so allowed and invited to be wholly ourselves and bring what we have. And yes, that can also create, interesting new sometimes problems, sometimes conflicts, and sometimes like dynamic tension. But like
Right.
ultimately, I think like I was watching this interview with Cabelli the other day, who's always
Mm.
like as a
I love
as a
Kelly.
as a personality been very interesting to me. And
Yeah.
and I've never met Cabelli, but I'm in her lineage, and there are things that she
Mhm.
directly brought into reclaiming from the
Mm.
work of like
Yes.
Wendy Palmer and other places that
Mm.
I take for granted. But I also know like when I teach those things, I talk about Cabelli and I talk about Wendy Palmer, and I like so like I do
Nice.
think it's important to like give, in the Hindu traditions or in what we call the Hindu traditions or the Vedic traditions, as you know, it is so important to give love and respect to our teachers. And so,
Yeah, but the problem with the woven path
yeah,
traditions is that
yeah.
you don't know. Like some things you just
Sometimes,
don't
yeah.
know.
Yeah, sometimes.
Just don't know. And it's not
Yeah.
like you have nefarious, you just are like, I have no idea where this thing came from, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
And so
But
I actually want to just take this moment to appreciate you because I know that's something you're really dedicated to is kind of like feeling out where did this come from and what is the history of this tradition and who brought what. And I do appreciate that because I think it's time. Like it wasn't time maybe 20 years ago, but it's
mm,
definitely time now, especially as our first gen elders
mm,
are getting elder and or dying.
we're
Like
dying.
now's the time. Now's the time to get that information. And so
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that you're doing that.
Well, for me, it's like an act of devotion.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for me, it comes from devotion, and I see and sense everything through spirals of relationships, and for me, that is part of it. I'm like, who's related to this and to this and to this? Because for me, it's like intimacy. It's
Right.
like here's the
Right.
intimate story, and there's something about that. And then also, it's also funny. Like there are like there are really humorous stories attached to all of this, and you get
Yeah.
to, when I'm talking to Pandora, or I've talked to Star about this, or to you, or to Dawn, or Rose when she was still alive. Like, like I get really funny stories, and also stories that come with grief, and stories that come with frustration, and stories that come with, I don't know, a whole bunch of other very human things. And
Yes.
I love that about reclaiming. We're very human.
You think?
We're so human.
Yeah, I'm glad about that. And again, some of my I think for I've had moments in my life where I
Mm,
really resisted, tried to get away and couldn't get away. And it's just
mm.
funny. I'm just like the goddess just was like, you're mine and you're gonna be mine forever. And you've
Yeah.
been mine for many lifetimes. But now, now I can laugh at it. But I think it's great to I lost my train of thought. It was something about being human
Humans. Yeah.
and how funny we are. But the consistent love and care and depth of intimacy that I have with my witches is beyond compare.
Mm,
It's beyond compare. I rely on it so deeply now.
hmm.
I don't resist it in the slightest. Now I'm like, these are my people.
Yeah.
These are my people. They've been my people for 38 years. They're going to continue to be my people, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I can't say that about every friendship I've ever had, but I can say that about many of my witches. And not all reclaiming witches are my witches, but like
Yeah.
the ones that are, they're my people.
Yeah.
And they'll be my people no matter what. And we can forgive each other. We can be kin. We can be that intimate where we get in fights and then we forgive each other and then we move on.
Yeah. That's real.
That's real. That is very, very
That's
real.
that's
And
the
the love
work.
is real. Yeah, the
Yeah.
love is real. The support, the mutual support is real. The calling each other out on our shit is real. It's
Mhm.
all like that's really important to me. Again, as a single person roaming around the world, that is anchoring.
Yeah, totally. Relationships are anchors. And that brings me back to asking that question about anchors, talismans, portals for you to like be with your work. And I think, in reflection, for me, I also have this really committed daily practice that I can't not have. And sometimes
Uh-huh.
it annoys the shit out of me. But the other thing is this relationship thing. And
Mm,
I think about tending and attention. And I think about the act of my magic. The quality of my magic is so often about tending. Like I'm like
mm,
tending to this relationship, or I'm hopefully skillfully with finesse bringing my attention to this mystery, and
uh-huh,
then communing with it and listening to it.
uh-huh.
And I think often about my, Yeah, I'm a witch. I think about the spirits all the time. I talk to them all the time. But I'm actually mainly fascinated with my living human friends. You know?
Tending those
Yeah.
relationships. And
Yeah.
how does that relate to your daily practice?
It relates to my daily practice in that I make myself reach out to people. I have a practice of reaching out. Like I have a practice of sending someone a GIF or a meme that I know will make them piss their pants. Or I have this practice of like, here's this song that reminds me of you. Or
Mhm,
how are you going? Or no, I actually really want to know. Or like,
mhm.
and like I do that all the time, like to the point where people know that about me. They're like, oh, Theo
Yeah.
checks in. Theo is that
Yeah.
person. But
Yeah.
like, but for me, it's like this intentional practice that
Mm,
is about tending and attention.
love
And
that.
also because I love friends. Like in high school, friends were the source of my inspiration, the source of my growth.
Mm.
Like I was like deep in, like I mainly ignored like study at high school because I was so obsessed with witchcraft. But
Wow.
probably my two obsessions in high school were witchcraft and friends.
Love
And to
it.
me, these things are so interlinked because when I die, I imagine I'll be thinking about who I loved and the things we laughed about and the pain we shared and the joy we shared and the magic we shared, you know?
By all accounts, that's the only thing you're going to take with you.
Yeah. So that's what I want, you know, that feels like the great work, the great play, the great offering. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Play is key. It's
Yeah.
really key. Yeah.
Yeah, play is intense. I remember once I was on a witch camp team with Raven Stanfield, our good friend, and she said, she said, play is serious.
Oh, I'm serious about my play. I
Yeah,
seriously need to play.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm,
And I
hmm.
was like, yeah,
And
that's
we're good at it, right?
true.
We're good at it.
Yeah, yeah,
The specific form of like
yeah,
singing, drumming, and dancing and laughing at
yeah.
ourselves is it's high play. It's high
It
play.
is high play.
I always say like I have really talented playmates.
Yeah,
And they're not all reclaiming witches, but there's crossover. You know, there's
yeah,
I think there's communities in the Bay that are also artists and activists that aren't necessarily witches, but there's like this there's those people have informed reclaiming too, and reclaiming has
yes,
informed them, right? There's this way in which we're all kind of being in this. I would say it's like life artists, right? We're life artists. We're
mm,
all allowed to express ourselves as life artists,
yeah,
and we should be laughing at ourselves because it's hilarious.
yes. It is. It is a joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you have?
And so that's how we know, right? Like
Yeah,
we're not a cult because we can sing, you know, we're so
yeah,
spiritual. And
yeah.
then, you know, that's a clue. Like we're not gonna make you give us all your money.
Yeah. I mean, God, we basically
Too
throw.
bad.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, do you have like a prayer or an image for like I don't know, your hope and your vision for this where this great turning can take us? And by the way, you know, Joanna Macy just died.
I know she
And
did.
and I
So
I'm
did
just thinking about
Andrea
great
Gibson.
turning. Yeah, Andrew Gibson, they died. That's right. And so
Oh,
I'm thinking about this engaged Buddhism. I'm thinking about this great turning and not looking away and being with it. I'm thinking about friendship and love and our hearts. Do you have anything right now, words or an image or a thing that you're like, this is what I'm focusing on?
do you know who Heather Cox Richardson is?
I've heard
She's
that name.
she's an incredible political historian, and
Okay.
she's gaining a lot of traction right now because she's giving us a lot of good information. She takes political information, political historical information, feeds it to us in a ways that are really important. And she's very serious. But she just had this thing recently where she was like, joy is really crucial. It's really crucial for these times. And in my own personal wrestling with all of this, as an activist who's done a lot of activist work and worked with a lot of very serious people, I feel that for me, my personal prayer is around keeping the techniques, the technologies alive that allow us to connect.
Yeah.
That connection, that joy is what what I'm holding on to as my peace.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? And it might be that I have to at some point do some really dangerous things or do something that is hard and serious. And sometimes even creating joy is hard and serious. But like my commitment is to remembering that essence of joy that is ultimately deeply, I believe, the human experience.
Yeah.
That is that it that and that joy comes after we feel the grief and the pain and the sorrow and the anger and the rage and all those things that can lead us to states of freedom and states of liberation and states of joy. And that is my living prayer, right? I don't always reach that living prayer, but I'm living into that living prayer right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that feels like really honestly similar to my living prayer. Like
Uh-huh.
I feel like if I had to express it right now, it's, I see this like spiraling, endless labyrinthine spiraling that has like flame and wind and lightning shooting out of it. But
Wow.
so that's the image and the sensation. But for me, yeah, it's like this radical willingness to keep relating, and to keep opening my heart and
Yeah.
to keep being in love,
Yeah.
with this earth. I recently taught an intensive about Bridge, who is a goddess I am in dedicated relationship with, and at the very end, I aspected her, and I have some vague memories of what she said, but I also have what people gave to me. Basically, at the end, apparently, she said, did you know that this Earth is it? Yes, the stars, yes, the galaxies, yes. And it's similar to what you said before. She said, this is it. This is the great gift. This is it. We come
Yeah.
back and we come back and we come back. So fill this earth with art, fill it with
Yeah.
love, fill it with, tend to each other. And she
Yeah.
said, this is what we used to do, and this is what people still do.
Yeah.
We meet and we do that.
And if there was enough, if we lived in a space where we remembered there was enough resources for everyone and we weren't trying to kill each other for it,
Actually.
we would be making art.
Yeah.
Crete, where they supposedly didn't have war for 2,000 years, what did they do? They made pottery, they made exquisite jewelry, they drew paint, they painted on their walls, they invented plumbing. Like
They
we
left
are,
over goals.
yeah, we're so creative. Like human
Yeah.
beings are ridiculously
Yeah.
creative. All you have to do is push them a little bit and they're like, "No, I can't do it." And then they come up with amazing shit
Yeah.
all the time. Like
All the
that, I'm
time.
unequivocally like I will stand on
Yeah.
that. I will stand on that. I've seen it over hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah.
times. So like that's what I do best.
Yeah.
And I hope I get to keep doing that. And I hope you get to keep doing that because it's really important that we remember to do that because times of war kill that shit. They
Yeah.
kill the joy.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I feel very yeah, like I feel very centered by this conversation. Like the arrow of my willfulness and willingness is like just so like feels so sharpened by this conversation.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
that.
And I love this.
Yay.
Is this from Minoan Crete behind you?
Nope.
What's
That is an ancient olive tree from Sicily. And if you look
Oh,
over in the corner, I can't point, but if you look over in the corner, there's a little building. That's the Temple of Zeus right behind it.
ah,
Temple of Zeus right
beautiful.
there.
Wow. I love that. I've always wanted to.
There was some really epic old trees in that particular
Yeah.
temple complex. Woo, yeah.
Yeah, that
And
olive
then
tree is a
funny
great
because
mother.
you get back, you go back and you go back and you go back, and you finally get to the back of that temple complex, and they're like, this is where the chthonic gods were worshipped, and there's an initiation cave, and there's all these
Mm,
spirals, and it's like, oh, I see.
yeah. Yeah.
Ah.
The witch's temple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, I could talk to you for many, many
Yeah.
hours, and I
Yeah.
hope we get more many hours to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks
Thank you
for
so much, lovely one.